That's all right. Looking for a sign that we are online. Are we online? Good. Thank you. So welcome everybody. Good evening from here, from the rainy London. Still quite warm. We need to put the AC on, so it's not that bad. My name is Rainer Kattel. I'm professor and deputy director here at IIPP, UCL, and I'll be keeping the panel and the event running today, and also do a bit of an introduction to what we're doing here. So first of all, thank everybody for coming. As you see, we are introducing our latest report around dynamic capabilities in city governments, particularly focusing on the idea of measuring those capabilities, because as you might know, we always know about capable governments when we see them in hindsight, or see lack of those capabilities in governments. But it's very difficult to actually find them in action.
Recording in progress.
That's good also, that we are recording. And so it's often very difficult to actually, how do you know that if you walk into city government in Chile or in Hungary or whatever, that actually they have capabilities. But this entire idea of assessing and measuring those capabilities is what we are today presenting to you. And of course, that's why it's called Capabilities Index, because if you can measure and assess something, you can also compare. You can look how your neighbor city is doing, how a country is doing, how a region is doing, how a continent is doing. So this is the entire idea behind the index that we are looking at today. And I will talk more about the report, but of course, everybody here in the room has the report. And you can already start looking at the graphics on the cover, because they are describing the capabilities in action. So if you don't want to read because it's Friday, you have read the entire day, the entire week, and a lot of students here, we have done a lot of reading this week. You can just look at the pictures. And this is what we probably all will be doing in the age of AI. We just look at pictures. And but before I do that, I'll do a quick introduction to the panel. We have 2 people here in the room, 3 people online. So it's like lots of people who want to have a say and have their take on what we are talking. I'll start here in the room next to me, Mariana Mazzucato.
Very next.
Very next, yes. The Christmas combo here. So it's
the New York City boring business guy, the Italian and the Estonian.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. The cold, the stuff. Anyway. But yeah, Christmas is not far, so should you celebrate? And Mariana, of course, probably doesn't need any introduction at all. She's professor and founding director of IIPP 8 years ago, and look where we are. So it's a wonderful, wonderful place. And of course, she's not only an economist and professor, but also very well known, widely known, appreciated fashion icon, thinker. Yeah, exactly. Venice Biennale, all of those things. So I won't read anything that is here. But then we have Jim Anderson, who's from Bloomberg Philanthropies. And Jim is head of government innovation at Bloomberg. And Jim has been working for over a decade now with various mayors, really starting from the US, but branching out more globally now, both Latin America, but more recently towards Europe as well. We have partners here across the city, well, really next to us, LSC, sitting here. And of course, Jim has an extensive experience also working with mayors, but notably with Mayor Mike Bloomberg in New York City, and was the head of government innovation there as well, and of course one of the founders of New York City Service. And very welcome here, Jim. Then going online, we have Kate McKenzie, remaining in New York, because Kate is chief executive director of the Mayoral Office of Food Policy, coordinating transformation of New York City's food system to be more healthy, equitable, and sustainable. So one of the key areas of public services, if you will, and of course that a lot of cities are struggling. So welcome, Kate. Oh, sorry, I probably should look at the camera. And then we move to Ana Claudia Rospa. Ana Claudia is currently the head of the UN Habitat, which is one of the UN key programs around cities and supporting cities really globally. And she was appointed by the UN General Assembly in 2024. And she has background, again, as an economist, working in housing, informal settlements, and urban policy across Latin America and World Bank as well. And she's one of the leading voices in urban policy and took office in 2024 August. So welcome, Ana Claudia. And last but not least, we have a mayor in the room as well, online, Claudia Castro. Claudia is Claudia is a civil engineer and has an MPA from LSE. So,
not a real university. Joke.
Joke, yes. And at the moment, he is a mayor of Renca in Chile, and since 2016 actually, so re-elected in 2021 and 2024. And he has been driving the 20-year plan for the urban, social, economic, and environmental transformation of the city. So this is our panel, and welcome Claudia as well. So the structure of today's discussion is roughly as follows. I'll first give floor to Mariana and Jim to set the scene more broadly. Not only why capabilities matter, but why this kind of work is really relevant, and perhaps there are. These days it's probably a very easy case to make because there's lots of people who are trying to dismantle capabilities in government. But yet we go over that, and then I'll introduce the report in detail, and then we have a panel discussion, people online, and you all can ask questions, chip in. So, Mariana, over to you.
Great. So first of all, welcome everyone, and thank you, Reiner. But especially also, I just want to give a shout to all the people in the room who helped put this together. So Ruth, Beck, Anna, Kwame, Mia, and many more. This is a huge collective effort, and it's great to have you in the room. But also, why did we do this here at the UCL Institute for Innovation and Public Purpose? This is essential, building those public sector capabilities at the city level, at the regional level, at the national level, definitely at the global level. Think even of public organizations like multilateral development banks, the UN itself. What are the capabilities that we need to govern the most difficult and complex challenges of our time? And the reason that we actually set up the Institute is that the answer to that question is not independent from our theory about the economy. As long as the state and all the civil servants working in the state, again, at the city or national or global level, are seen at best, at worst, get out of the way, at best as fixing a market failure, at best as enabling, de-risking the cool risk takers in the private sector, regulating, just all these words that literally you kind of want to fall asleep as you're saying it. There's no reason to have those dynamic capabilities. All you literally need are bandages to patch up the system, hence the market failure framework. You just got to fix stuff, right? So this idea that the market provides, and when it messes up, you go in, whether it's funding of things that the private sector is not providing because of a public good characteristic, or trying to get the private sector not to do the bads like pollution through a carbon tax, that doesn't help transform an economy. And we were super excited to work with Bloomberg Philanthropies, who focus on cities, because there's no place like a local, even more local than a city. We worked in Camden, by the way, which is part of London, very large, 250,000 people. But cities are so interesting because the mayor's office, for example, has much easier access to all those different stakeholders, because the key capability, of course, is how do you collaborate? How do you work with others to solve problems? But very much central to IAPP has been this outcomes problem-oriented idea of the state, not just making up any random problems, the problems that the citizens, the people, care the most about. And what's really interesting, in fact, I want to do a shout out to one person in the room. She's going to be embarrassed also because she's about to leave. Pooja, where are you? Just raise your hand. Pooja, for really far, wow, runs an organization called Public Practice that we actually allied with very early on. And it was so interesting. What they've been doing in this city is documenting just how little capacity cities globally have. Not just because sometimes of ideological, if you want, backlashes, think of the whole Doge agenda, but also because they simply have not been investing in that capacity. And if you look over time, I think the statistic that I always exaggerate, but I just looked it up, so I won't exaggerate, is that it used to be that in the UK, 49% of architects and designers worked for the city, for the city at the local public sector level. Now it's less than 1%. That is a huge change from 1976 was the date that statistic comes from. So how do you build it up? You don't just say, oh, we want geeks in government, as a famous public official here at one point said. You need to make it so exciting to work in the city, to work in government. It becomes an honor. And so that's why we need that narrative shift. If you're seen as kind of a value co-creator, not just at best a redistributor, enabler, de-risker, fixer, these two things go hand in hand. And I always say that it wasn't a coincidence that Obama managed to get a Nobel Prize winning physicist to run the Department of Energy back when he was actually doing a fiscal stimulus, when Europe was instead just doing austerity after the financial crisis. Why? Because he really made it exciting. He said, not only are we not going to do what Europe is doing, austerity, but we're going to have a real fiscal stimulus, $800 billion, for a green transformation. Forget what later happened, the Tea Party, so on and so forth, but he really built it up. And this guy at Stanford who had won the Nobel Prize in physics was like, woo, I'm happy to be part of that. Had he said, come in and help just design a carbon tax or something to facilitate the green companies to work with us, he probably would have said, no problem, happy to help, but I'll stay in the university, right? But he actually found it to be an honor to go work with the government. And I'll pass over to Jim because really this collaboration, which is very much, again, at the local and the city level, as a sandbox, if you want, to unveil, to highlight those properties that we need to both rethink what is a city government for, how does it work with others? It's always about working with others, and of course the private sector, but also other types of organizations. How do we actually then work well together by investing in those very important capabilities, which Reiner's going to run through when he presents the report, but also where are the examples where we see this? And that's why it's so great that we also have Kate here. I met her just last week at UNGA, the UN General Assembly and Climate Week, because we were presenting there the work that we've done in Camden, very locally, in Sweden and in Brazil, on outcomes-oriented procurement, right? Government's purchasing power, which is often 30 to 40% of government budgets, to procure school meals. One of our students, are you here, who's doing school meal stuff? No, anyway, school meals for every child in the city or in the nation as a welfare policy, but because it's being done in a really ambitious way, it becomes part of an innovation policy to make sure that every child has access to healthy, tasty, so not just ketchup, sustainable, or IKEA meatballs in the case of Sweden, sustainable school meals. That means that the way the city interacts with the private sector becomes innovative, right? And it requires local manufacturers, sustainable, regenerative agriculture. And these things require different parts of government to work together. So working outside the silo of this is just for the Department of Health, just for the Department of the Environment. So interdepartmental collaboration on something as simple as lunch, right? That's actually what also got us to the moon, and we won't go into that. But that idea of using outcomes-oriented procurement, that requires capacity and capabilities. You can't just hear an economist lecture about do outcomes-oriented procurement. How do you test? How do you iterate your experience on the ground of what that meant to go outside of this really narrow market fixing box towards a market shaping, co-creating with others? And Jim and I, I'm going to pass over to you, kind of thought this up one night a long time ago when I was late for a meal and decided to call him. And we started saying, wouldn't it be amazing after the collaboration we had already had to start really thinking how can cities learn from each other, but also have a ranking that doesn't make you compete. It's not there to make you feel like, oh, I'm only number 10 instead of number 2, but actually really build that aspiration to rise up in the ranking, learn from others, but also, and I'll shut up here, perhaps an index that's useful for funding agencies, for example. Think of the public banks, the NDBs that I already mentioned, which together have 24 trillion, by the way, dollars worldwide, to start actually helping those cities that they're working with to invest in those capabilities as part of the kind of conditionality of even getting that loan, because there's no point in giving money to different organizations if they haven't invested in the implementation and administrative capacity. And that's very different from other indices that exist out there that are either just competition or also, to be honest, sometimes dysfunctional. Just look at the ease of doing business index, which is basically competing on how much you exploit workers. So passing over to Jim on just how important this work has been and maybe even in the context of what you do more broadly.
Great. It's very nice to be here and amazing to just take the next step in the partnership with all of you and your incredible team. I want to give a shout out to my colleague Claudia Yuch, who has really been leading this project for us at the foundation and has brought so much to it. Congratulations, and what a big step. It's very exciting. So as Mariana and Rainer mentioned, I have been working for Mike Bloomberg for quite a while. I served in City Hall for 8 years, 4 years at the Homeless Services Agency, 4 years as his communications director. And in 2010, he asked me to come up to the foundation and build out the government innovation programs. So it's been 15 years. And the mission that Mike gave us was a really simple one. He said, I know from my own experience the incredible opportunity that city halls have to solve problems, and I know how incredibly difficult it is, how under-resourced they are, and how much they need support and someone in their corner to give them connections, resources, skills, and other things that they wouldn't otherwise have on their own. So for the past 15 years, we have been building up a global set of programs that are focused on strengthening the problem-solving capacity of city halls. We do that by training leaders, giving leaders from mayors to chiefs of staff to data and innovation leaders to procurement and budget chiefs a sense of what the 21st century job description looks like and the necessary skills to do it. We build data and innovation teams within city halls and spread existing best practices across networks of cities. We fund ideas competitions where we ask cities to partner across sectors around ambitious solutions. We give them private capital to test those ideas because that's often difficult for the private sector, particularly local government, to do. And then we help spread the best of them. And we take that work really seriously and understand that that's also a challenging task. It's to take an idea from another place requires innovation and adaptation to make it friendly and interesting and appropriate for local context. So the programs are global. Last year we reached about 900 cities across all of these different initiatives. It's been fun to work on city innovation for the last 15 years. When I was in City Hall, problem-based procurement was not a thing. When I was in City Hall, no one was talking about agile development. When I was in City Hall, human-centered design was, we sort of heard about IDEO, but that wasn't a part of the practice in local government at the beginning of the century. Over the last 15 years, that has shifted. I give tremendous credit to two movements, the public service lab movement and the civic tech movement. Both of those exploded onto the scene in the 2005 to 2010. They introduced new concepts, new ways of working. And while both of those movements have since sort of peaked, I think they left a thumbprint. They left ideas that got into the bloodstream of city halls. And because cities are more networked than any other level of government, those ideas have socialized and spread. I'm so honored to be on this panel with Mayor Claudio Castro, who is one of the mayors in this network who has been both a huge adapter and sort of, he's been taking a lot of these practices and scaling them up in his city and has now become a lighthouse practitioner where other mayors from across the region come to him to understand what he's doing. And because of that deep interest in sharing and spreading ideas in cities, I think we are at a very different moment when it comes to dynamic capabilities. There's been a lot of experience, interest is high, we have a growing batch of evidence, and really now the moment is about scale and systematizing. That's really the challenge that we now face. And that's really what this partnership with UCL is all about. Scaling and systematizing the critical capabilities that allow mayors to be, and by mayors, I mean municipalities. I always shorthand municipalities for mayors, but please know we know the difference. But this is a moment where, every single issue that is challenging us at the national level, at the international level, you can argue pretty persuasively that municipalities are both the first line and the last mile. They are where the problems land. Think about the refugee crisis, think about the affordable housing crisis, and they are where we will find the innovations that move us forward. And so investing in the capacity of municipal governments to rise to that challenge, to be able to adapt in the face of change, to seize opportunities, to put their cities on a different trajectory is just critical. And to not invest in those capabilities is magical thinking. And yet it is the norm. Most money in local governments is tied up in existing program delivery. City halls do not have an abundance of resource to build the strategic
Adaptation.
capabilities needed to see change, to detect it early, to innovate, to test, to shut down things that don't work, to scale up things that are, to shift their delivery and resource mechanisms accordingly. That's really what we're talking about here. So incredibly excited about the index. I think the index does three things that I'm excited about. One, it helps cities see clearly their strengths and their gaps. And that's really a gift to municipalities that all want to be the best that they can be for their communities. Number two, it allows them to compare wisely, because we're going to create benchmarks against peers for realistic target setting and pacing. So creating peer groups that allow cities to see what other cities with similar sorts of resources are doing. There's nothing more powerful than that. If this mayor can do that, we can do that. And finally, it'll allow them to invest where it counts. Aim scarce time, scarce money at the capabilities that are most likely to help them drive better outcomes. Finally, to underscore that point that Mariana made, the African Development Bank cannot get enough project pipeline going for all the financing that it has access to. There's a project pipeline problem. Municipalities struggle to have the capacity to develop locally sourced, civic values aligned projects, put them together in a way that can get the financing that is available in the world. There is no national government anywhere that has a let's make our cities better problem solving budget line. There is no national government that is in the business of strengthening the problem solving capacity of cities. In part, that's because this is an invisible problem to them. There's no data that allows them to see their cities relative to the cities of peer nations. We're going to fix that. We're going to be able to put that data in front of finance ministers so they can't be blind to the fact that their lack of investment has a real world consequence and they're trailing behind their peers. That's the kind of competition, that's the kind of race to the top that I think we're really excited about here.
Perfect. Yeah. Thank you so much. I mean, I think it's a wrap. I mean, both of you did such a wonderful job in laying out the landscape, if you will, why capacities in government overall, big picture way are relevant, but particularly, of course, looking at cities and why this kind of research that we have trying to do is so important. So I'll do a bit of a presentation of the report you see here. If you are really into reading, you can download the long version of the report as well. This is online, so you can do that over the weekend and read the report. So I'll try to be as quick as possible because, of course, we want to hear from people online as well. So I think we don't really need to repeat why this kind of index work is relevant, but just to sort of go there at where Jim ended, is that there is no really comparable data to look at whether a city in UK, in Australia, wherever the world has those capabilities that it needs to actually start solving problems. We very often have proxies. We know the outcomes are bad, but we don't know why they're bad. And we sort of stumble around those kind of issues. And so that was really the starting point of our work. We know that cities are solving those problems. Some of the cities are doing it better than others, but they are all sort of trying to fix those. So there are those capabilities in action, and we know from wider research community and our own research that governments can do well if they focus on those problems and develop those capabilities. So that was really the starting point from our work, is how do we make it more systematic? How do we make it more visible what is happening? And so that's why our work was both academically grounded, but very much working with practitioners who are actually working in the cities and trying to do those things. And as Jim already mentioned, there's really the comparability that is really key. And here's like a bit of a broader context, why those capabilities are not only in sort of individual organizations and on the dynamic end of capabilities and trying to adapt and change, but also, of course, there are what we call structural capacities like financial rules, constitutions, all of those rules and regulations that cannot be changed from one day to the next. Even if we realize that there is a crisis coming to us, we can't just change the UK constitution. Well, there isn't one anyway, but you can't just change those kind of rules of the game so quickly. So, but these are very much focusing, shaping what cities can do, how they can react. So they are reacting into that kind of environment. And of course, organizations are always bundles of day-to-day activities. People come to work, they start to, procurement processes, all of those things, collaborations, funding mechanisms. These are all grounded in some sort of rules and rule-based environment. So what we're really trying to understand, if you're trying to compare organizations, is how do they react to their environment? How do they use their environment, positively or negatively? Is it holding them back? And as, for instance, Jim was mentioning, if we understand for Africa, for instance, how can we help those cities, perhaps they lack in the similar capacities, similar capabilities, we can devise much broader programs of investment, of capability building. And actually, that's why the contextual capacity is so important to understand as well, because then we understand what in a specific context is holding governments back, rather than just saying more generically. Or if you look at singular case studies, you can say, yes, it works in your context, this case study, but what about me? I don't have this kind of fiscal space. I cannot raise taxes, for instance, whatever might be the case. So that's why we have this more broader and complex view, and particularly in the longer report, if you're interested in the geekiness of it, you can really get the good and the best of it. So these are the capabilities that we are talking about. We see these as bundles of 5 capabilities. Of course, it's never a single capability. It's a multiple things that are around a bundle. And this is very much what the practitioners were telling us as well, that they're all in a way connected as well. This is all about starting from strategic awareness. Do you understand the environment you're in? Doesn't mean that it's not only about longer term environment, but it's also immediate environment. For instance, like you mentioned, migration, people coming into the city, we need to react now. How do we get this sense of where those people are? What can we do with them? Where's the resources that we can utilize? So it's both the immediate and the long term. A lot of cities, particularly in the global south, are impacted hugely by climate. Climate change is coming to them in a massively important way. And so they need to develop programs for today, but also thinking ahead 10, 15 years of time. How do we go to a better energy system, for instance, and things like that. But of course, then you need to shift those priorities as well, or the existing priorities. If you understand you need to do something differently, you need to shift what you're doing today. You need to build coalitions, like you mentioned as well. Cities are very connected. They always need not only collaborate within the city, but they need very often central government to give them permission to do certain things, or a funder to help them to actually find those resources, a donor or a development bank. It's very often the case. Cities don't have this disposable capital that they can invest. But again, if you think about public services, it's very often about learning what works, rather than sort of vomiting policy, as Chen Palka so beautifully says, to citizens, and here's new policy and let's do it. I think it's very often understanding whether our idea of solving the problem is actually working. Very often might not be, because you're taking the idea from somewhere else, you need to adjust it, you need to localize it, contextualize it. And that's why we think learning and experimentation are such an important capability for cities. And of course, you need to then be able to shift delivery. You need to actually go to school meals programs, whatever you have, actually change that program on the ground. And hence cities, why they are so interesting, learning grounds to understand government capability, because it's where we all experience governments actually, is the cities. And so we have worked with lots of people, experts, officials, cities around the world. This is the phase 1, as it were. So we were testing, can you make it systematic? Can you make it visible enough? Do you see those practices in cities? What those practices look like, from strategic and awareness to learning and reconfiguring delivery? What does it look like? Can we develop a checklist? Can you check and go to a city in New Orleans or in Renka or whatever that is and check? Are they doing that? How well are they doing that? So this is what we have done so far. And again, this is sort of the repeat. I won't go into that, what those kind of capabilities look like. But I think the idea is that you very often find those capabilities helping mutually, or they're together. If you have a good sense of foresight and data on analytical units, you're able to actually shift budgets more quickly because you have good data, you have good information, you have good awareness of what you're doing, and so on and so forth. And of course, because we are talking about measurement, assessment, which is really the tricky bit around when we talk about capabilities, because capabilities are very often intangibles. They are within organizations, the way organizations work on a day-to-day basis. And that's why we very often we look at outcomes only rather than what works. So we have devised this entire sort of idea how to do that, how to make it scalable, how to make it repeatable, standardize this process, because the entire idea is that this becomes a standard way of looking at city-level capabilities. You can measure them and then also devise action around them. So this is all about bringing the qualitative data from a city, talking to leaders of the city, together with more quantitative aspects of how are they actually using their budgets, what outcomes they're actually achieving. Can they show that they really do this thing? They might tell, yes, we are super innovative. Can they show what they're actually doing in engaging citizens, for instance? And so this is how we are imagining looking at how we rank. And as Mariana mentioned in her statement, we don't want to rank cities from 1 to 1,000 and say you're 99 or you're 151, because that's very often comes race to the bottom rather than race to the top. And so hence we have devised this idea of contextualizing the measurement. So imagine that this is your country. Cities are on here, or this is your continent. And then you can start thinking, most of our cities are weak in a certain aspect of capabilities. We can then hone in on why they are. Is it maybe that we have fiscal rules that actually don't allow them, or procurement rules that don't allow them to actually focus on those issues? So we can devise a joint solution rather than going city by city. So imagine if you're in Brazil, you have 6,000 municipalities. Going city by city takes you literally forever. So you have to think about in a much more bigger sense and have this sense of measurement behind you. But we think that this provides you a way of actually measuring capabilities without blaming cities, but actually showing strengths and weaknesses in a heat map kind of way. And then, of course, if you go under the hood, we can show you where your city is more specifically without you being afraid that next day you find it on the front page of your newspaper, which is the fear of every mayor, I think, anyway. And so here's just some of the examples how these multiple capabilities are working together. From the cities we have worked so far. So this is from Seattle. If you look at the picture, I think it tells pretty much everything. Many cities today look very, very diverse. So if you think about that, we are developing a new or a new service or fixing an existing non-working service. We very often have this an understanding that what works from our perspective, but this might be very different from a different cultural background, language, religion, all that. So how you get those voices into the policymaking. And Seattle is an example of community liaison program of actually engaging people from very different backgrounds into policymaking in a very direct way. So you're able to sort of build those coalitions, adjust priorities, and learn, experiment as well. And so again, increasingly, this is how our cities look like. They look very diverse. So we need to be much more, let's say, less hegemonic in our thinking what is good and what works, and much more welcoming. And so Rio de Janeiro is another interesting example here, just to quickly show you. Again, everybody, I think we all know the Big Brother-like Rio operations room that was devised to really understand where people are, how they're moving around the city. But they're increasingly using it actually for climate response, because they realize that extreme weather events are getting more and more often in Rio. So of course, if you think about there is extreme weather events, this might lead to all kinds of problems in the city. From health, people might be dying on the street, people might not get to work, kids might not get to school, for instance. All these issues. So how do you react to that? This is where they are sort of cascading solutions from how do you warn people, how do you understand the readiness of hospitals for these kind of events, down to this understanding the energy system. How do we actually move to much more renewable, much more or less vulnerable energy system in Rio? I think there's one more, but I think I'll skip the Cape Town in order to get to the debate. So we have also heard from stakeholders. They love it, of course, because, well, we show you the work. But of course, you can see from a city perspective why it's interesting, this kind of measurement of capabilities, because you can position yourself without being blamed for not performing in some areas well enough. But you can also see, well, what is a city in Finland doing so much different in strategic awareness? Oh, they might have a really great foresight unit, or Cape Town might have a really great foresight unit. Can we learn from that foresight unit for ourselves? But of course, if you're sitting in central government, it's the same issue. So how do I reach all of those government municipalities? It's a very piecemeal approach. We might develop a joint program of learning. We might work with universities. We might work with funders, and so on and so forth. And yeah, so this is really where we see the examples of both benchmarking, but also really working with tools around those, sharing those tools, and also learning by doing as well. I think this is where I will finish. Is very much looking forward. You see, we started with 40 cities. Yeah, you're not reading it wrong. We go to 3,500 cities, so nothing but very ambitious. But exactly the idea is that we can, once we have developed this methodology of measuring, you can add more and more cities. And of course, the more cities you have in the database, the more richer the data itself becomes. And you can use all the wonderful tools of modern science to actually unearth those connections, add more quantitative aspects like fiscal, budgets of cities, outcomes from cities, and so on and so forth. So this is what we want to do. We want to also, of course, really work with select a number of multilateral institutions, governments, to test that in practice, but also turn the light from cities towards central governments. Can we actually utilize this same kind of measurement on government agencies who are looking after cities, for instance, and investing in cities, state-owned enterprises? So this is also something that we are very keen. And of course, we are very keen to embed the index in ways of working, not only in cities and multilateral institutions and central governments, but also in academia and in other places as well, because we want people to join in, to question us, but also to add, to help us, and to be critical friends here around the table as they are. I think that's it. So this has been the core team. We have already talked about that. Thank you very much, everybody in the room. So this is it from me. Thank you for listening so carefully. And now we go to the panel. Actually, we go directly to online. And I want to ask, are they online?
Yeah.
They can hear us. I want to go to Anna Claudia first. Can you hear me, Anna Claudia?
Yes, I can hear you. By the way, it's raining. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, yes.
It's raining a lot here in Nairobi. My internet is shaking.
It's the same in London, by the way. Raining and shaky internet. So.
Move over a bit.
Yes. So I wanted to ask you from a UN perspective, how do you see cities actually dealing with these kind of capabilities? What do they do to build those capabilities? What is your experience yes?
And maybe, Anna Claudia, just for the people in the room who don't know what UN Habitat does.
Okay. Well, anyway, I couldn't avoid. Hello, everybody. Thank you for the invitation. It's a big pleasure to be here, and I'm really a big fan of the work that you do, Mariana, and the center and everything. Just wanted to lay out here the scene before I speak. But Rainer, I couldn't avoid to go to memory lane right now because because the rains in Rio, they happened around, it started in January, but then the heavy rains that affected Rio, Niterói, the metropolitan area in April, they happened just 1 month after the World Urban Forum took place in Rio de Janeiro. And I was just drawing a parallel line to the timeline that James was mentioning, when things started to change, about development, about the action in cities and how cities plan and so on. And so one of the key, the core, more important information about UN Habitat, Mariana, you asked me, is the New Urban Agenda. The New Urban Agenda is a document that was approved by member states in Quito, Ecuador, in 2016. So almost 10 years now. So it really coincides, James, with this trajectory that you were talking about, right? The New Urban Agenda talks about people at the center, The new urban agenda talks about more, simplified and transparent planning modalities that everybody understand. The new urban agenda talks about multi-level governance, the importance of the local drive, but the need of having these structural aspects, right? And structural aspects, the structural component is one of the components of the index. The right legal frameworks, the right regulations, the financial frameworks all aligned, and in supporting in support of local action. The new urban agenda talks about participation, the need to integrate and access stakeholders. So UN Habitat was created 50 years ago to deal with the urbanization challenges. Basically, at this point in time, 76, conceptualized in Vancouver, the idea was the shelter crisis. The world was being urbanized, and we needed to deal with the shelter crisis. So, but then in 2016, we approved the new urban agenda, right? That incorporates everything that James was talking about and really highlights the role of cities. From 2016 to now, UN Habitat has evolved. And one of the more important roles that UN Habitat has been having in the last days is the support for local action, the support for cities, right? And the UN system has been realizing more and more the importance of cities, the importance of cities for the Sustainable Development Goals, right? And we have 2030 just around the corner. The importance of cities for local climate action to deal with climate change. And UN Habitat has been the organization dealing and working and supporting cities, and not only for the implementation of the new urban agenda, but overall, right, to address the major climate and development challenges that we have. So this is at the DNA of the new urban agenda, of UN Habitat, and everything is connected. So the World Urban Forum is the major event of UN Habitat. It happens every second year. And this year in Rio, in 2010, when the center was created, the World Urban Forum happened in Rio. So Rio was the stage for global stakeholders and come and talk about the new urban agenda. And then immediately after, I was working for the World Bank, and the World Bank assembled a group of experts to go to Rio de Janeiro and to work, around the disasters and see how prevention could take place and what were the actions. The end of this work was a metropolitan governance mechanism, because one of the main findings was there's need for coordination, and the disasters, they don't affect one single city, right? Affect a major area, and we have to work coordinated, and we have to work throughout several levels, and the information that we need is not available. So we need to work with partners and stakeholders to get access to information and to extend the resources. This is what happened from my perspective in Rio de Janeiro just after that. And the real center, the data center, was implemented under this spirit, right? The need to innovate, because Brazil hadn't been affected by disasters before, but it started to be, so they needed to innovate. But to be objective here, and in relation to the presentation, I want to highlight 5 points here in relation to challenges that cities face, and my thinking how the index, all the work that you have been doing can be very helpful. So first of all, defining and understanding priorities. I see that all over the place, right? And having the political support for that. This requires capacities of talking to people, establishing, participatory mechanisms, and exactly the example that was showed about Seattle. The second one is access to data and information. Our sector, the urban sector, is absolutely under-researched. Yep. We lack data. We don't have data about informal settlements. We don't have a global definition about informal settlements. We don't have a global definition on homelessness. We lack on data. So how we can, collect data we need to expand our resources. We need to rely on qualitative information from practitioners. We need to get researchers together, consolidate the body of research that we have and make it available for cities. This requires the ability of establishing partnerships, to talk to local universities, to talk to organized civil society at the local level, and see how much of this information can be incorporated, through qualitative efforts, and how can we improve our capabilities to have more and more data that is available. The third aspect is understand trends and practices, and you all referred to that. And this is the highest demand that I receive at UN Habitat. Cities want to know what's going on out there. And here our role, organizations that and institutions that work at the global level, is critical. Because we have this global overview. We go to events, right, Mariana? We went to New York last week. We spoke with several people. And I was able to, capture what was going on in several places in a matter of, 3 or 4 days. But people working in cities, they don't have this luxury. And so having access to practices is critical. Mm-hmm. One of the second most downloaded publications of UN Habitat is the publication of the Shanghai Awards. It's an award that's given to best practices. And then everybody goes to the World Urban Forum. And then Claudio, nice to see you, un gusto. We worked together when I was at the Lincoln Institute. Everybody wanted to attend the courses because they could exchange with people. And until today, everybody's connected through the WhatsApp groups and exchange on a daily basis, right? The fourth is identify the preferred path. And here our role again. So looking at the trends. So how can we apply to the local context? And I really liked when you mentioned the local context. In the local context is very, very different, very, very different. We cannot expect Freetown in Sierra Leone to have the same institutional arrangement to collect property tax, but they can innovate based on their capacities. They mobilize the communities to look at land and to improve the local revenues. So we need to be humble enough and also change a practice from the past of copy and paste. We really need to understand the context, respect the context, and build with the capacities that are already there, and think about incrementally building capacity. The final element is really collecting resources for implementation. I mentioned that before, through partnerships, right? And through committees and commissions and coordination mechanisms, also to bilateral partnerships. So these are the 5 elements that I would like to highlight in terms of big challenges, but also big opportunities for us, as a global community, and how the index and the work that you have been doing and the narrative alone can be very helpful to the work that we are doing.
Thanks so much. Super helpful, Ana Claudia. I think Mariana wants to...
Well, I just wanted to give a shout out to UN Habitat, both because our good friend Ana Claudia is currently the executive director, but also the previous executive director, Maimouna Sharif, who's currently the mayor of Kuala Lumpur. We, with LSE Cities, which Jim and Bloomberg Philanthropies work very closely with, we co-chaired this Council on Urban Initiatives, and the question that we asked was, what does it mean to have a healthy, green, and just city? So not just a city, but with those adjectives, what does it literally mean for? I mean, it was almost the seed of this index. And we did all these case studies, like the care blocks in Bogota, the Gaziantep in Turkey, just before their earthquake, by the way, all the work that they were doing on embedding immigrants into city governance, and lots of different case studies. And the people on the commission were mayors. So we had, you mentioned Freetown, we had Yvonne Sawyer. We had Ada Colau, who, by the way, is on a flotilla today trying to get to Gaza. Shout out to Ada, Claudio Lopez, and so on. And it was just, I just want to say thank you so much, because it was UN Habitat's idea. You chaired it, and this really was the seed of the index.
Brilliant. Thanks. And before we go on, if you're all start thinking about questions or comments you might have for everybody on the panel, same goes for people online, start writing them up. We are soon getting to this phase. So going from global to very local, Kate, over to you to New York City, as local New York City can be, which is also a very global city, of course. But so how do you see from very much from the street level, perspective, these capabilities and challenges that we are talking about?
Sure. Thank you so much. I really consider the work that I lead in the Mayor's Office of Food Policy in New York a specific sort of use case of this work. And in New York City, we, as Jim knows very well, we are the United States' second largest buyer of food. We serve more than 220 million meals to vulnerable New Yorkers across 9 different agencies in New York. Obviously, the largest, as Mariana identified, is our school meals program, serving almost 1 million meals a day, and my kids are eating those meals today. As well as, for example, in our homeless services center, in our corrections program, our older adult centers. There are many different settings. Our public hospitals, 11 public hospitals are another example in which we're buying and serving meals. So, when we think about food and what we're buying, you can think about, that those could be ingredients, like what we buy in our schools, things that you might have on your shopping list. But also in the case of, let's say, our homeless services, those are actually prepared meals, right? And so there are many different ways that we are buying food. And as we know over the course of the years, food can be an expression of values. Certainly under the leadership of Mayor Bloomberg, we identified food standards, and we've just updated those over the last 2 months. And we know that food is an expression of health, right? And so we can express health, and we very much lead on public health in this city. Food can also be a way to express environmental standards. We've been able to reduce the carbon footprint of the food that we purchased by 29% over the course of the last few years. Food can also be a way to express your values in local economies. Food can also be a way to make a statement about labor. But all of these are ways that you can drive these values through procurement. Now, what I particularly appreciate through the work of this is the complexity of procurement. Now, what is really, really valuable here is I really love the frameworks here, particularly around organizational structures, right? Or what's a norm, what is a law, or what is a tradition? And what you're proposing here is really an assessment about where is a city willing to take a risk, where do they have the capability to take a risk, and in what instances. And now what we've experienced across different agencies is sometimes there's more capability and interest in that. And what when we, in a city like New York City, we have many different opportunities to pilot different innovations. For example, just before jumping onto this call here, we're about to launch a challenge-based procurement, which has not typically done in the space of food. In other instances, we're still fighting for those, race to the bottom instances of how do we push and get beyond the lowest cost for food. But, again, when I articulate those those values of food, when we're looking at, health, economies, environment, I really suggest that this is very different than just looking at something like a paperclip. We've got to be pushing for more values-based procurement other than goods and services. But this is often not what the case is, especially in a state like New York. And so partnering with lawyers, partnering with other cities, this is where this work is also very exciting to us, across the globe, across the country. These are things that are very, very different across state lines, across country lines. We're able to look at different use cases and where this has been possible and also where it's not possible. These are some of the ways in which, Mariana's work and the work that you're all experimenting with here is very exciting to us. I think that, again, the way in which food is a particular example here, we look at it whether there's, again, looking at specific commodities our, outcome measures of can we reduce the time it takes to do a procurement from 18 months to something like 3 months? Are we looking at expanding our pool of interested vendors? Or are we looking at maybe not rinse and repeating the same type of procurement or changing the conditions of those procurements? These are all things I think that are really exciting in the space of procurement, especially for municipalities, right? Like these are things that also introduce lots of opportunities around, around artificial intelligence, around opportunities for governments, around, looking at just different ways in which we're evaluating procurement, which often have not been changed in many, many years. So I love the opportunity that Mariana has made available to us by looking again specifically at through the lens of food, to be able to, again, marry the idea of different values where we're able to push the envelope beyond a race to the bottom to expressing different values in the form of procurement.
Brilliant, thank you so much. And I love really the way you described the index as showing where cities are taking risks, because that's in a way, really the way of looking at dynamic capabilities is where is the space to take that risk and what kind of shape it then takes, what is the organizational support for that. So it's a very nice way of describing it. And of course, Mariana probably will say something about food later on, but Institute has been doing a lot of work around food as one of those core areas where technology and our behavior meet in a very meaningful and carbon footprint meaningful way. Now coming to you, Claudia, a mayor in the room, talking about from a mayoral perspective here, and you've been mayor for quite some time. So how do you actually build those capabilities in Renka? What's the secret sauce?
Well, thank you very much, and I'm also very happy to be here sharing this panel with all of you. Renka, first of all, I speak from Renka. Renka is one of 34 different boroughs of the city of Santiago. Santiago is the capital of Chile. And just like London, before having a greater mayoral authority, we lack that authority, So in the city, we have 34 different mayors. That is a challenge of coordination also and governance. And Renka is also in the northwest area of the city. It's also considered to be one of the most deprived areas of the city of Santiago. And it used to be also part of the city where, like, the destiny of this area of the city was poverty, It was the poorest people of the city with a poor municipality, with lack of professional capabilities, but I would say most of all with a lack of enthusiasm, and ambitious about changing the future that everyone was supposed to have here. So I would say that that's why I'm so happy to be here, because we early understood that if we wanted to change that destiny, we had to make things different, and one of the key aspects of that was precisely collaboration. So we understood that we had to go and look for first the answers that probably in many aspects of the challenges that a city has, all the answers exist, you have very good practices everywhere, and the thing is to connect with them. For that, we learned early that we had to go and look for the best networks. So I'm so happy to be here with Jim. Bloomberg Philanthropies has been very important, not only for Renka, I would say for through Renka probably to Chilean municipalities. Also, we are a member of the MOI network, and we have learned a lot of the work that you are doing in UCL, and I'm, as you know, I'm an LSE alumni, so that's so good to also be here. Well, Ana Claudia and UN Habitat, and before Lincoln Institute, we learned a lot from them. So I would say that's one first aspect. I speak from probably a city that is more similar to most of the cities in the world. And I would say that we need to break this, what we're supposed to do. And that's not only related to what people think of each city, but also in a more political aspect, especially for first-time mayors. You are supposed, maybe you most of the time can be assessed not because of what innovations you did, but most of it for what regular things you didn't do, you know? So that makes a lot of new majors to be, I don't know, conservative in the management aspects. That's also important, and probably it's something that you have to have in your mind. You know, you have to do what you are supposed to do, but if you want to improve your outcomes, you have to innovate. So collaboration is a key. You know, we have learned from different best practices around the world, and also from Chile. That is not obvious. I think you need to, from the mayor itself, but also in the main senior staff of the city, you have to keep pushing for go and look and connect with the outside opportunities that you may have. I would say that also, and now I go to this capability index. What I value from this is that we now have a shared language, you know, to understand. You can put together different majors, and we have something common to speak about and to share experiences about. So I really value this. I think that you have a challenge with the ranking um, topic. You know, it could be also considered to be. I mean, me as mayor, I don't want to be in the lower part of the ranking. So we have to transform this into an opportunity to have meaningful conversations, to bring these new capabilities to the city, and to share this with the different teams. I think Mariana said this. You know that. I think that working in a city level is probably the most exciting thing that you can think about. When I was studying my MPA in LSE, I felt studying the MPA, I already knew that I was going to come back to Chile and be a candidate, you know, for in Renca. But it seemed to be kind of disconnected because we were speaking about global trends, bringing new instruments, but it's a whole world between public management as a main topic and to bring it specifically to the city level. And I think that this index brings us to this kind of conversation. And I think that it will be a very good instrument. I hope that we can have something connected also to the national level. You know, I think that probably in order also to address this ranking challenge, to have a national conversation using the index can be also very helpful. Probably to have partnerships with the local universities can help also. But it's a very nice and new instrument that we will surely use.
Thanks so much, Claudia, for these wonderful comments. And one of the main learning experiences we had was actually with the Chilean GovLab, the way they're measuring innovation in public sector. That was very informative for us, which was exactly not about ranking, but actually giving feedback and much more helping people rather than trying to claim you're good or you're bad. And so that was very, very significant. So I think at this point I would love to get the audiences engaged, also because the room is quite warm, and so it's a way to let some inner anger out, or excitement, of course, also. So if and we have, I think there are online some questions as well. So Jack has them. So raise your hand. Oh, there's a gentleman over here. So, no, I have a microphone as well.
And if you can say who you are.
Mike Standing. This is an incredibly interesting and important discussion we've just had. I'm interested in this idea about how you make these benchmarks work effectively, because the question that Claudia raised is an important one. You know, often when you do benchmarks, it becomes a competitive system, or even worse, people sort of draw some averages and say you're here, and if you went up to the top decile, you'd be able to transform. Have you thought about actually, when you're building the benchmarks, that you actually sort of record the characteristics of that city, so that individuals can say this group of cities are kind of relevant to us because of GNP or growth rates or population densities, so you can make that transition easier so that people can draw relevant conclusions. Just curious about how you've approached that.
Let's take a few more questions. So we have for the panel and people online. There's, okay.
Hello, my name is Zach Rosen. I'm a big fan of the IPP's work. I was curious, so you said that your goal is to kind of add another 3,500 municipalities into the index, expand the data and whatnot. You'd mentioned also earlier, kind of towards the beginning of the talk, that you also want to apply this framework for thinking about this dynamic capabilities of national governments, international organizations and whatnot. And I was curious to hear more about how you kind of plan to do that, if you have any ambitions on a particular timeline with that kind of work, stuff like that.
Brilliant. Let's take one or two more. Yeah.
Hello, everyone. Derek here from Apolitical. My question is around resource scarcity and this whole push around efficiency. So I think, Jim, you were saying early on that vast majority of budgets are tied up in programs that are already happening. There's very little money left. It's being cut left, right, and center. In that condition, in that context, how does this framework, how does this help? How is this going to be rolled out when we have very little resources to work with?
Great. Let's take one more, then we have.
Hi, my name is Usama. I'm an economic policy candidate at SOAS right now, studying. I have one question. It's a fantastic piece of work. I'm from Pakistan as well. I've had certain experience working with the government on industrial strategy and innovation policies, but I have a thought on this. Can this framework be used to empower city governments or local governments in countries where the policy development process is generally more top-down? The question here is essentially, how can we convince central governments, certain central governments that are more resistant to change than others, to pursue this framework? That's essentially the question. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. And I can start, and other people on the panel might think where you want to come in. And then the next round is online questions. So to your question, we didn't really go under the hood of a lot of the work that we have and try to really figure out what kind of types of groups of cities there are. And indeed looking at both the vulnerability, the level of economic development, but also the political system around it. There's lots of thinking about that, not to be just sort of randomly pushing cities together into a group, but really make it comparable that makes sense from that perspective. And of course, then you can adjust it to a national level. You can do a UK-based view. That's sort of the hope, is that eventually you can give access to certain actors that then can have a look the way they want to have a look. If you want to, and that's sort of the idea there. But it's very has been always at the forefront of our thinking, is how not to create something that is easily gameable, easily becomes a blame game, and also partially because what Claudia mentioned around politics of mayors and politics of city, which I think is such a complex environment. So we don't want to be seen as providing beating sticks or whatever, but actually that's more internally helpful for city governments in their everyday work. You want to take?
Maybe I'll take the second and the third. Where do you go? You, yes. The question about, what does this then mean for national governments? We actually first approached this at the national level. So for example, during COVID, we did a study with UNDP, looking at which countries in the developing world had done better in terms of actually providing what citizens needed, whether it was PPE, whether it was a vaccine, but also the trust that was needed. Just think of a lot of the mistrust that we continue to have globally. And we found, and we actually made a list of 5 different capabilities. Again, the seed of this work. This happened probably 2 years before this public sector capabilities work began. But a lot of that is really about kind of learning from what actually happened on the ground. Even in Camden, the work that we did around designing, similar to what Kate was talking about with food, the outcomes-oriented procurement, so challenge-oriented procurement for adult social care across 10 different housing estates. The most interesting lesson there happen at the local level that's just so much harder to reproduce at the national level, which was getting people involved in the design of the challenge-oriented procurement. So in that case, it was the carers, mainly women, carees, the people receiving the care, to bring their feedback, to have a voice in the co-creation, co-production of that policy. So really what we should have, and this brings me to the question about money, we really should have lessons going from the local to the national, and then money flowing from the national to the local. And of course, all these cities we looked at have very different forms of finance, right, in terms of how they're financed. And this idea that money is limited, can I just say, I mean, I'd have to do an Econ 101 class for everyone, come back tomorrow. That's, I don't want to say the swear word, am I allowed to swear here?
Yes.
So it's not limited. We saw, we see now with defense spending globally, what was limited for education, for climate, and for health, all of a sudden for defense spending is unlimited. For cities, it's limited, of course, because of how they're actually receiving the money from the national level. But often, coming back to procurement, it's sometimes, since you talked about lawyers, we actually do need the lawyers, unfortunately, and some lawyers are amazing, others are whatever. But that idea that actually to change procurement, to go from cost-plus procurement to challenge-oriented procurement, that's often a legal issue. So in Brazil, where we worked very closely, in redesigning procurement for their own ecological transition, the first thing was change the law. In Italy, where lots of the corruption has actually happened through procurement, also, by the way, from school meals, what they did was straitjacket procurement, so limit the ability to actually use the existing budgets. They put it in an agency called l'Agenzia Nazionale dell'Anticorruzione. Sounds beautiful because it's Italian, but it's terrible because it's an agency for anti-corruption. Of course we have to battle corruption, but you don't straitjacket the main tool a government has at any level of government, again, 30 to 40% of the budget, by making it scared to do anything because you might get sued. That's, by the way, why we opened the doors to consultants, unfortunately. And we just wrote a book called The Big Con, how we've infantilized our government agencies through the McKinseyfication, if you want. But the reason why Deloitte, McKinsey, and so on have such an open door is due to the fear. You'd rather someone else take on the risk. So again, that kind of cultural shift that we need, is huge, but also the legal, the financial. Like, we should learn the lessons from the different cities, how they've tackled that.
Great.
I would maybe add on to the procurement thing. And Kate, it was so nice to hear more about your work. And as you were talking, I think we are really focused on shifting the idea of what procurement offices do. We find at the city level, it's often tradition that gets in the way of doing things in new and different ways as a first order issue more than legal issues. But that shift that Kate sort of talked about kind of is a great example of like why this is so hard, right? To shift procurement from being compliance and risk aversion to being solutioneering and an innovation arm of the municipality. That means different tools, different mindsets, different incentive structures, upskilling, culture change, patient leadership. All of those things are required to make that shift away from a compliance culture. Mm-hmm. Is it any wonder that most places decide not to do the heavy lifting? Mm-hmm. It takes too much time and energy. So I think by formalizing these best practices, elevating them, standardizing them, and showcasing the best of the best, and making it easy for others to learn, it shortens that. It brings it within view. It creates a tangibility that I think is really important. On the efficiency thing, I actually think I really think this will be very important for resource-scarce municipalities. Mm-hmm. Yvonne Aki-Sawyer was raised a moment ago. She's the mayor of Freetown. The Sierra Leone is the 9th poorest country in the world. 60% of the residents live below the poverty line. She got a small delivery unit. She has been able to use that small couple-person delivery unit to punch way above the weight of peer cities, to draw down multinational funding, to win awards, to bring resources into her community. And that has an incredible power. We run an African mayors program. The other mayors in Africa look at what she's doing and they go, oh, that's within reach for me. Yeah. I'm not competing with New York. I can do something right here, right now. Yvonne Aki-Sawyer showed me the way. Mm-hmm. And so I think It helps resource-scarce communities make better decisions with their highly limited resources and bet on things that are evidence-based and more effective. And I think that will be a really important service that the index provides moving forward. I don't know if we answered the question about top-down. I think we're going to have to be opportunistic and do case making. Ethiopia is a country where the president appoints all of the mayors. The president is investing a tremendous amount in the capacity of the municipalities around digital, around updating their land registries. He's making he or she, excuse me, I'm sorry, we work with mayors, not presidents. But they're making a very significant commitment in municipal capacity building. That's a top-down investment. And so I think part of this will put a new tool into the hands of case makers around, hey, you don't want to be left behind. You too need to invest in your municipalities.
Anybody online, you want to chime in on any of the 4 questions or aspects of what you heard from Mariana and Jim? Yeah, Kate, go ahead.
I just wanted to offer that just hearing the question about the ranking and coming from a very large city, I think that's an important point. And to raise that you might be doing well in one area of your city, but not in another. And sometimes that just to be able to pull that out and one area might get forgotten because one area is doing really well in another area, and how to be able to discern and distill amongst those areas.
That's what Claudio said about the conversation, using it for a conversation.
Yeah. Claudio?
Yes, related to the 4th question, I think that this how to bring central or national governments into this is also a political challenge. I'm from Chile. Chile is one of the most centralized countries in the OECD, so we have very weak powers at the local level. But I would say that each time we are seeing that the awareness of the impact of different local policies is getting higher, so people is also asking to bring more capabilities to the local level. And I would say that before that political challenge, if anything changes, bringing this kind of dynamic capabilities and innovation and using of data, for example, to show that mayors, we used to say the whole tons of things that we do, but not only we say about what is the outcome of the things that we do, so bringing data to the city and these dynamic capabilities will probably make people get more and more aware of the importance of these down to top, policies. So, and also this, I have been in a couple of COPs, and I'm going to be now in the next COP that is going to be held in Brazil. So it's again a Latin American COP. I can see there how cities, when they give a step forward, when the national government is giving a step back, for example, in the US now with the national government with their views on climate change, there is a great opportunity to see the impact that cities have on the everyday lives of people. So I'm pretty sure that this awareness of the importance of bringing strength to the city level will grow in the future. But we need to push for that also, that is the political level. And in the technical aspect, we need to do things better with what we have now. And that is also a way to achieve this, how things works now.
Definitely. Claudia, do you want to come in?
Yeah, I think my predecessors, spoke a lot and many things that were in my mind. And thank you, Claudio, for mentioning the COP, because this is actually one of the things that we are going to do at COP. We are putting mayors, local and regional governments with ministers to discuss issues around, urban development, housing, informal settlements, vis-a-vis the climate challenges that we face. And this is happening at the UN level. So we just helped, supported the Secretary General in issuing a report about how to strengthen the role of local and regional governments within the UN system. This is online. The Secretary General delivered to the General Assembly a couple of months ago. So this is very important because throughout the process of designing this report, we realized that more and more the UN system is realizing the importance of local action. Member states are realizing the importance of local action. Yeah, and I do agree with you also. These are political aspects, and a technical instrument has limitations. But for me, what's really important about this, about the work that you are doing, is the narrative that can be used, in technical and political spaces to make the case for strengthening the role of local governments, and also a very important factor. And James, your when you speak about Freetown, and I'm completely on your side on this one. People, there's a myth about capacity. And I think this narrative and the work that you do, that you have done, kind of brings it down. So when I talk to people sometimes, I feel there's an expectation that things are perfect and ideal. So, and then you have a city could have all the professionals available, but then the curricula needs to change because the curricula is not the perfect one. So you go a long way, Well, we have to change the curricula of the universities. We have to bring more people. We have to have more scholarship, and then these people, they have to come back and work in cities and so on. And I think you demystify that a little bit, right? And let's think about the simplicity of the capabilities that are already there, the capacities that are already there, right? And how can we improve those incrementally and context-oriented? I liked the context-oriented aspect, yeah.
Thank you so much. And we take one question maybe from online, or two quick ones.
Perfect. So there was lots of really great questions. Maeve Powlick asked that she's curious about how this tool could be used with very small cities, and is there a minimum size where you think the tool is appropriate? And Christian says that innovation is political is the motto on the last page of the summary report. Without political support, any capacity or capability building is more prone to failure. So what do you think we can do about this in the real world, and how can we capture this through the index?
Great questions. I think just quickly on the size, no, it doesn't matter in this context. And although one way to look at this 3,500 cities that we're trying to map in the next phase is this covers actually all above the 100,000 cities in the world. So that would be one way to look at it. But definitely, like with Renka, we are interested actually in the cities that are not those global cities only, but all kinds of cities. And in a way, the way we have designed it is it's actually agnostic to that kind of definitional, because you can always be stuck in this definitional issue, either city, municipality, regional, whatnot. Who wants to take the? You want to take the last?
Well, our campus is a mini city. We don't do this. We should practice what we preach. When they were building HS2, still building, probably will never happen. Big infrastructure project. The big rail. They had to close down lots of the local restaurants. The Indian, Pakistani, Bangladeshi restaurants on that street. And we said, wouldn't it be great to use challenge-oriented procurement for the for the catering of the whole university to be done with this local producers instead of what? A massive multinational corporation that has almost all the cleaning and catering contracts in London called Sodexo. By the way, there's a huge strike right now of the cleaners in this university against how they're being treated by this company. And so it was impossible. We weren't able to do it. So, there is something about, is it size? Is it really not very smart legal issues? Is it where there's a will, there's a way? What is it about leadership, but also, practicing what we preach? And I do think it's a problem when in academia we go around telling everyone what to do, and our own departments, faculties, and universities are not a good example of the agility, the flexibility, the outcomes orientation, so on and so forth. And I just think it's not about size. There's something else that we need to always be, and it is about that the innovation is political point. It's really about where is the leadership and the vision and the learning at those different levels And universities really should rethink themselves as being test beds of some of this experimentation instead of just preaching.
Great, thank you. I think we are. You want to
say something?
No, I'm fine. I'm good.
Sorry. Thank you. Because yeah, because I think we are at time or very close to it, and also
4 minutes.
being it's 4 minutes. I used to I used to 4 minutes, but being mindful, it's Friday evening, and also I'm sure you want to have a chat with each other in the room, people in the panel. Unfortunately, not with the people online. I think there are some refreshments upstairs, so you don't have to run home unless you want to, of course. So you're welcome to stick around, have a chat, talk to us, and because in many ways this is only the beginning. This is just to show what's possible. Now, if you're interested, come to us, get in touch, email us, come to us in person. In what way ever you want to collaborate, our doors are open, and we will be very, very willing to have a chat and take you on the journey with us. And thanks again, Jim, Claudia, for all the hard work. Thank you. And the team in the room. Yeah. Thank you very much. That's it. Thanks to everybody online as well.
Thank you online.
Thanks.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Have a great
Bye-bye.
day. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Great. Good.